Good evening and welcome to this evening's Policy and Resources Committee of Worcester City Council. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Do we have any substitutes?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, apologies from Councillor Alina Round. Hannah Cooper is substituting for Alina tonight.
Okay, I think everybody else is here as expected. Yep. Super. Any declarations of interest? Karen?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member of Purdisvale and I'm also a school governor. Thank you.
Sorry, any others? No, not seeing any other hands up. Any public representations? I can't see anybody lurking at the back of the room. Which brings us on to the minutes of the last meeting, which was the 26th of September, to be approved and signed. If I go through them page by page, okay, I haven't got to page 1, but Alex?
Sorry, it is on page 2, but it's the it was just a question on the penultimate paragraph on page 2 says it's intended that there will be a report on the delivery of the corn exchange in the November meeting of this committee, which I note is not on the agenda, so I was just wondering if there's any update on when that was coming, please.
Through you, Chair. You're absolutely right, and I remember offering that date myself, sitting at this very table. The reason that that's not come to this particular committee is we are awaiting the outcome of the government's announcement on the levelling up funding. I would want to provide reassurance that the bidders that we have in the procurement for the food and beverage that's still a live process, that's still going well. Work is still on track to award the to commence the works in January in terms of the Scala as we've advised previously. But specifically, I did think about what we could manage to usefully bring to November, and I decided that I'd been a bit premature myself in suggesting November. So very soon it will be back.
Okay, if I go back to page 1 of the minutes, if anybody's any questions or comments on that. Page 2, anything else? No. Page 3. Adrian?
Just wondered if we could have an update on the place partnership bid.
Through you, Chair. I'm happy to confirm that the expression of interest was submitted, and about 10 days ago the Arts Council advised us that we've been invited to make the full bid submission. Members will recall that we are bidding for 800,000 from the Arts Council with match funding from other sources, and our bid must be submitted now in early January. You'll recall that it's delegated to officers in consultation with chair and vice chairs of this committee.
So yeah, thank you. Opportunity to share good news of progress on that. Thank you. Page 4. Page 5. So that's no amendments, and I'll sign sign the minutes off, and we've got some useful updates out of that. Thank you. Are we next item, statutory review of polling stations? Are we okay to do that item?
Chair, yeah, Claire's going to join us online for this item. Hopefully you've better seen here on screen. Okay, Claire, I hope you can see and hear us okay.
Yes, I can. Thank you, Julian. Am I okay to start?
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Okay, lovely. Good evening, all. I'm joining this evening to present the findings of the statutory review of polling arrangements. You'll note from the report the recommendations are to consider and approve the proposals that have been made for new polling stations, and to also note the changes to a number of the polling districts, which then will be published for Council's consideration at its December meeting. And then finally, to authorise the returning officer and the deputy returning officer to take the necessary steps to implement the recommendations. You'll be aware from the background of the report that it is a statutory requirement to carry out a review of polling arrangements across the city, and this needs to be carried out every 5 years. The last review took place in 2019, and this review, the recommendations of this review will need to be completed by the 31st of January 25. As part of the review, and very importantly, local authorities must consider the accessibility requirements of potential polling stations when considering designating or reviewing a polling place. And as part of that review, local authorities must seek to ensure that all electors in a constituency in the local authority area have reasonable facilities for voting. And so far as reasonable, every polling place for which it is responsible must be accessible to electors who are disabled. So with those considerations in mind, the review itself commenced on the 1st of August this year, and I'll just summarise the key stages of the review. Stage 1, the review commenced with the publication of a formal notice. The formal notice, public notice, was published just to ensure that all stakeholder groups, councillors, residents, disability groups, electors, were all aware of what the process was and the time frame around the review. Stage 2, the formal consultation, took on 2 parts. The first part was to publish the existing arrangements, so all the existing polling places and polling districts that are current, asking stakeholders then to comment on those proposals, to comment on their suitability if they felt they were adequate, but to also recommend alternative venues if they did have any alternative venues in mind. The second stage of the consultation involved the returning officer and the registration officer submitting their own proposals. And these proposals were very much based on the comments that we already received as part of the first stage of the consultation, but also formed part of what were known issues to us. We don't just carry out a 5-year polling review, we're constantly reviewing our voting arrangements, polling arrangements to make sure that they are indeed adequate. And there were a number of polling stations where we know there are issues. So as part of this review, the intention was to resolve those known issues at the same time. Stage 3, the conclusion of the review, after all representations were made and the returning officer submitted his, at the time it was Shane Flynn, his submission. Those findings then formed the report to P&R for you to consider tonight, and then also a referral report to council, who are responsible for agreeing any changes to polling districts. The final stage of the review will happen after the council meeting in December, when all the findings, all the recommendations and all the documentation, all comments that were made as part of the consultation process will be published online and on the council's social media sites. So just to summarise where we've got to with the preferred option, and you'll see under section 5 the listed preferred option, and the preferred options, it's important to note, are all based around a set criteria that the Electoral Commission agree as to what they deem to be a suitable polling station and polling place. So that criteria was used to evaluate these proposals. So you'll see there in section 5, there are 4 substantial proposals to changes of polling stations. And if I just take you through each of those, the first one involves the ward of Arboretum, and it's to change the existing polling place from the Goodrest Tavern to a marquee located on the Co-op Food car park in Baker Street. This is one of the polling stations where we know we've got issues. We have had reports of intimidation around the entrance to the public house there. I did, together with the electoral services team, have on-site meetings around that area, and unfortunately at the current time there aren't any other suitable alternatives. So the recommendation is there that we keep the actual area of the car park, but base a marquee as far away from the pub as we possibly can on the Co-op car park. The positive of keeping it on the Co-op car park is that the area is very, very well known to residents. The Goodrest has been a polling station for a number of years, and people are very much used to going to that location to vote. The second proposal covers Cathedral Ward, and this is to change the polling station from the current car park adjoining Waverley Street to the Henry Sandon Hall at the Royal Porcelain Works. The current polling station at Waverley Street is a temporary build. It's not ideal, particularly in terms of the growing residential area there. Waverley Street isn't located within the main residential area, whereas the Royal Porcelain Works is bang in the middle of that growing residential area. The third proposal involves Fort Royal Ward, and that is moving one of the polling stations, which is a particularly busy polling station currently at the Horizon Centre on Midland Road, to the 104 Regimental Royal Archery, Worcestershire Battery, which is in Pheasant Street. The fourth proposal involves Nunnery Ward, and this is moving from Lincoln Green off Chelmsford Drive to Ronkswood Hub in Canterbury Road. We used this particular polling station at the last elections. We've had very positive feedback from electors on this proposal. The main reason why we want to move from Lincoln Green is that there have been recent incidents and episodes of vandalism. And as a temporary measure, we moved to Ronkswood Hub, and as I say, proved to be very successful, which is why we're recommending that as a more permanent fixture. In addition to those 4 substantial changes, there are also proposed changes, minor changing regarding polling district boundaries, and this is a result of the local government boundary reviews that have taken place at Worcester City Council and also at Worcestershire County Council. And the main reason for recommending those changes to boundaries is to align as much as possible the city boundaries with the county boundaries. You'll see from the implications to the report, there is a slight financial implication with the cost of marquees. And what I've done with that financial implication is I've broken that down under the 4-year term now. So that equates to £921.25 as an annual increase on the cost of providing an additional marquee. I think it's important also to note the equality implications, in that the recommended changes to polling districts and polling places takes into account the provisions of the Equality Act 2010 and the Representation of the People's Act 1983. And in addition to the equality implications, and obviously what we have to bear in mind in terms of accessibility, is this has been heightened as well with accessibility requirements as part of the Elections Act. As you know, there are stipulations, further recommendations that we have to put in place regarding disabled voters and access requirements, and also the fact that we have to check personal data now in polling stations, that we have private areas to enable voters to do that. So that's a summary of the report. You'll see in Appendix 1, it is very detailed. Appendix 1 outlines every polling station. The coloured boxes are where we are recommending a proposed change to that polling station. And also you'll see under each of those polling stations, there is reference to any comments that have been received as part of the public consultation exercise. So I'm happy to take any questions. If I hand back to you, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. It's a very technical subject, as it were, with precise sort of criteria and legal processes involved. So thank you for that. Any questions? I've got Hannah first.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really welcome this report, especially with the change in Arboretum from changing from the Good Rest Tavern. I've experienced people that are intoxicated, shouting, and being very unpleasant, especially when I've been holding a dog and haven't been able to treat. So I really welcome that. I think it's a really good location. Councillor Lewing and I have been stopped in the street by Muslim residents saying that they don't feel comfortable using the Good Rest Tavern because it's a licensed venue. So I think this is a really good move, and I really hope it will increase voter turnout. Thank you.
Thank you. A question for Claire. It's a question about the Oldbury Park Road Primary School polling station in St Clements. In previous years, I know that the school were a bit unhappy about it remaining as a polling station. I was just wondering, did you get any objections or any concerns from the school this year, and how were those addressed?
Yeah, thank you, Louis. No, I'm not aware of any negative comments for the use of Oldbury School, Louis, for this consultation. I know there have been some concerns in the past, and we work closely with the school to hopefully put measures in place that counteracts those concerns.
Okay, so as part of this review, did you ask them for an opinion? Were they a consultee in the review?
Yes, the consultation was made public. We did write to our current venue owners, hirers, caretakers, to identify that the consultation was live, if they wanted to comment.
Fine, okay, that's great, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. There's a lot of detail in there. I'm probably 5 years late, but I'm still grateful for the previous report, moving my own polling station from, I think, being 1.5 miles away to about 200 metres away. So that was very good. I had a minor issue filling in the survey when I was looking at the changes. I had a man who volunteers on our bike bus, who uses a mobility scooter, who reported on polling day, because he votes at the Good Rest, that he wasn't able to get into the venue unassisted with his mobility scooter. So I'm glad to see that change. And I said at the time to him I would submit his details to the survey. And what I found after that was the survey only allows you to put feedback in about one polling station. And then when I went to put in further feedback on St Stephen polling station, it said you've already filled in the form. So it was a slight limitation. I could have sent them in by email afterwards, but it's I just wanted to give that feedback. And on the St George's Primary School polling station in St Stephen, there's a step in the room, or step to get into the room. It does mention about looking at the accessibility arrangements. So just wondering what arrangements we'll be looking at for that polling station, please.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Mace. Through you, Chair. Yes, and thank you for making me aware of the survey, and that you could it only allowed you to make one entry, and I have noted that for future reviews. I think what I would say is, if you do have any feedback, please always email me. As I say, we don't just wait for every 5 years to do this review. We're constantly reviewing our polling station sites and making improvements. So please feel that you can email anytime if you have got any suggestions or any concerns, because we will address those and take those on board for each election. And thank you for noting I'm aware of the step at St George's Primary School, and thank you for picking that up. That is on our action plan, to talk to our operational services to have a ramp made for election day to assist voters with that step into the polling room itself.
Thank you. Louis, your microphone. Karen?
Thank you, Chair. I remember in the polling stations last year, I saw, David Sutton was cycling around on his bike. And I'm just aware that 3 out of 4 of the polling stations in Arboretum, there is absolutely nowhere to park a bike. And I'm wondering whether we could look across the city at improving bike parking at polling stations, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lewing, for that. Yes, of course, and appreciating that's a bigger scope on this particular review, and other service areas would need to be involved in that, but I'll certainly take that away. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really welcome the report. Actually, in terms of it's really timely in terms of the boundary reviews that have been going on both at city and county, and certainly from my perspective on a Fort Royal ward, the ward has significantly changed. So the addition of a new polling station in St Martin's Quarter at the Army Regiment Centre is actually really quite welcome, especially with the proposed increase in housing numbers in and around the Shrub Hill estate, which it will cater for. Makes absolute sense. Only one slight concern around it is obviously St Martin's Quarter is a bit of a hub for antisocial behaviour. In the evening, we've had known reports of intimidation from people walking, whether they're standing at the cash machines or whether they're passing through. There is that concern. So just to be aware for the electoral team to ensure that the extra measures are put in place, that any intimidation or antisocial behaviour is curbed. Thank you. And on a similar note, on the accessibility, there could be an argument, if we're increasing provision for bikes, that actually those people that walk their dogs, is there a lead? Is there a hook that they could tie their pets to when they go into the building, or take them in, or provide water for their pets as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riaz. Both really important points, which I've noted and I'll take forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I just wanted to say, comment on the change from Lincoln Green to the community hub. I think it's a very positive change from my point of view. Not only is there a cut through of a couple of 100 metres from Chelmsford Drive, you know, the Lincoln Green area to the community hub, so it's really quite convenient on foot, but also there's a generous parking area and it's a very well-known venue, so I think it's a very positive change. So well thought through.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands up. I mean, well done to officers. It is a real challenge to find suitable locations that meet all the criteria. And there are still some wish lists on top of those that we found. So I think certainly for Cathedral Ward, I think Henry Sandon Hall is quite an inspired choice. So well done for sort of finding it and getting there. This is an important set of recommendations because it is about ensuring that voters have access to a local place and which meets the criteria. So if I can ask committee members to vote on the recommendations. So it's to consider and approve the proposed polling places as set out in the appendix and report, to note the proposed polling districts and refer these proposals to council for consideration and approval as set out, and then subject to approval by council to authorise the returning officer and deputy returning officer to take all necessary steps to implement the recommendations. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you to the team.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening.
Okay, so move on to item 6, which is Q2 financial monitoring. Is that you, Kathy?
Thank you, Chair. It's quite a lengthy, detailed report, and I'm not planning to go through it section by section. I'll just pull out the main items. So this is the budget monitoring report for 24-25 based on the results to the end of September 2024. Put my glasses on, that'd help. So starting with revenue, the forecast for the year is an overspend of £4,000 against budget, which is an increase in spend of £152,000 since Q1. The variance in Q2 is mainly made up of the salaries underspend. This is following the agreement of the national pay increase for staff. We budgeted that a lot higher than it was finally agreed, so that's a saving of £311,000. We've got a better position on net interest of £122,000, and then a reduced minimum revenue provision, lost my figure, of £351,000. This is the result of using excess capital grant monies for our capital programme as part of our freedoms and flexibilities. We do, however, have a shortfall in fees and charges. The main areas, as discussed in Q1, is in planning and bereavement services. And we continue to predict an overspend of £400,000 on housing benefits. Further details of the revenue position are shown in section 4 of the report. Just to point out that in paragraph 4.2, I've missed out a decimal point, and it should say 30.6 million, not 306 million, as our expenditure budget. Thank you, Councillor Mace. Appendix 1 is a summary of the variances in Q2 compared to the budget and compared to Q1. And then further financial information on the revenue forecast is in appendices 2 to 6. Section 5 of the report relates to capital. The budget has reduced to 23.5 million from the original budget set in February of 24.8. This is mainly due to reprofiling some of the spend as some of the schemes are behind the original timeline. The detailed forecast by project is shown at Appendix 7, and this shows an underspend of 338,000 for the year, of which, lost my figure, and that relates to, excuse me, the remediation costs of the Sanson Walk site coming in lower than expected, and also, I've lost my place now. We've rolled forward some of the IT budget for the renewal of laptops next year. You'll also see earmarked reserves are shown in the section 9 of the report, showing details of the city plan reserve and the risk reserve. And the appendices also show the section 106 and SIL, and that's in Appendix 8. And finally, I've already mentioned Treasury Management Forecast, but there's further details if you wish to see them in Appendix 9. Happy to take any questions on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a good kind of explanation in the covering report and the detail of numbers sitting behind in the appendix. So any questions? I've got Alex first.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. There's obviously a lot of detail in there. The main question I had was on point 8.2, write-off of council tax. We're already writing off apparently 200,000 this year and 173 cases, which is more than the total for all of the previous years in the table. So that seems like a big increase. So I was wondering if there's a particular reason for that, and what the pipeline of enforcement or arrears looks like for the rest of the year, whether we're going to see similar numbers for the rest of the year.
Thank you. There's a couple of reasons really. The first reason is we've got a higher, a record amount of arrears in that area due to COVID, etc. So the team are currently working through that list to try and reduce it down, to try and recoup all the arrears. We're seeing a lot more IVAs and debt relief customers coming through, and our commitment to poverty is making us decide then those debts aren't worth chasing up. As far as going forward, it's really difficult to second guess what going forward is going to look like due to the customers that are left to chase. We don't know what further actions will be taken for that debt relief process and IVAs, etc. So it's difficult to predict. I'm just being told that the Revenues and Benefits Service are chasing and trying to clear all the arrears, which is why you're seeing that bigger amount come through.
Chair, thank you. Mine follows neatly on from Alex, actually, it's quite spooky. Yeah, with the collection rates, obviously we use a shared service, and I'm just thinking in and around that, are we getting the best value from that service, and how do our collection rates and our arrears compare to other similar authorities? And the other question, if I may just briefly for after, is with the car park income, are we noticing any negative effect now that we have the Ringo only car parks in 5 locations? Thank you.
So if I come in on the shared service element, so I attended a management meeting with the other 2 partners last week, and we're looking at collection rates. Worcester historically is always a couple of percentage points behind Malvern and Wychavon in terms of collection on both business rates and council tax. And you'll see that our collection at the end of the year, we're at about 94%. It's always more difficult to start trying to collect those debts in the following year, and that's sort of systematic. So our objective is to try and get those debts paid within the period of the billing, because they do become more and more difficult You'll notice in the report that says it shows that some enforcement action was suspended due to the pandemic. That has an impact, and it sort of exacerbates the problem and just makes those collections more difficult. But historically, and this was confirmed to me last week, we are usually 1 or 2 percentage points behind the other two councils due to the makeup of and the dynamics within Worcester City compared to those other two boroughs.
I don't have the specific details of those car parks. I just know overall our car park income is doing well. I'd have to look at those individual car parks to give you a report on that. I'm happy to do that after the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Orcott makes a really, really good point. I think that's the line of my questioning as well, to try to understand that the service level we are getting from Wychavon, and how much are we paying into the service? Is it a disproportionate amount from the other two local authorities? If it's an equal share, then I can understand the proportion of time spent on, I suppose, Worcester. But if it's a higher amount, are we getting the value for money? And should they be putting extra effort in that area? So that's the question.
In terms of value for money, we have looked at some benchmarking, and it shows that the service provided by the partnership is actually pretty cost effective when compared to other councils where they've got an in-house service. My understanding is they treat all three councils as a whole. So very often when they're doing, if members are on audit committee, they'll see audit committee reports coming through where they've looked at the audits, and they'll look at all three databases are sort of combined. So they do look at the positions as one and then section them out for the reporting. So I don't have any reservations in terms of, from what I've understood so far, about them providing a lesser quality of service to Worcester compared to the other two councils. If that goes somewhere to answer your question, Councillor.
And it's perhaps worth saying it's only kind of been brought in-house away from a commercial provider, hasn't it?
Yes, Chair, that's what, and they went through quite a large conversion exercise in moving an IT platform as well, which did cause some problems, I believe, historically.
Thank you, Chair. My question is related to the electric vehicle charges, item 4.8.7. It says that we are going to exceed what we've, the modest budget of 30k, but we've still got to take into account electricity and maintenance. But why I'm thinking about that is that when we had the Environment Committee business case for this, we said that external funding is always required for the installation of EV chargers. I'm probably being optimistic, but I know that we've got an EV business management group, and I'm wondering whether we could actually really look at these costs and the benefits that we're seeing now with the increased ownership of electric cars, and actually see that last time we had an AUX fund of, I think, 68,000, and as a council we put in 55, and actually the balance may start changing as in the coming years, that we might be able to fund them with less support from grants. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I think we can look into that and report back, Councillor.
Certainly the ones in St Martin's Gate are pretty well full nearly every time I pass through, and are hugely popular. And it's maybe worth kind of taking the opportunity to mention the newer installations within the city. So Tallow Hill is opportunities for people, particularly living locally, and a special offer, isn't there, for residents for overnight parking. So I hope more people will take advantage of that. And there absolutely is an appetite for more people to be able to, who want to drive EVs, and some assurance about infrastructure. Thank you. I've got Louis.
Thank you. I've got a few praises really. I think I just want to say thank you very much for obviously pretty good figures for garden waste and trade waste. That seems to be going very, very well. And also like to note also the paying our local suppliers within 10 days. You know, it's pretty much 90%. So that again is a very good result. So very much welcomed. I've got two questions though. The first one is about housing benefit. It's a budget of about £400,000. When you read the report, it's quite complicated in the explanation. I know it's all there and all quite technical. I'm sure it's correct. But could you explain it in plain English about what that budget's for and why we need to have so much, 400,000, and why there's doubt? This is something that comes up every year, and I think it's quite important that we understand it so that people listening will understand why we've got such a large money for a budget for hopefully that we won't spend.
There was a report that was presented to the to Communities Committee by Tom on the impact of temporary accommodation and how that affects the housing subsidy payment. So I'm not quite sure how many million subsidies that we get from the DWP, but when we have quite a lot, when we have a high proportion of people in temporary accommodation and supported exempt accommodation, we're not able to recoup all that money back. So that then impacts on that subsidy allowance.
Is the 400,000 that's budgeted this year a similar figure to what we had in previous years, or is it higher or lower?
I think 400,000 overspend this year is similar to what we anticipated last year, and it's something we will be picking up as part of budget setting for 25-26.
Thank you. Okay, and I've got another question as well. There's an adverse on cost this year for IT licensing. I think it's in the report, 20% increase. I guess that's because it's a monopoly. Microsoft can just say, we're putting up the price and stuff. Yeah, we really have got no choice. But I'm just wondering what our options are there. I mean, I think nobody really wants to go away from Microsoft, but presumably all of the local authorities across the whole of the UK are going to have the same problem. And is there anything we can do in terms of working with the other authorities, or even getting the government to say, look, Microsoft, why are you charging this extra money? You know, it's not 5% or 10%, it's a 20% increase. That does seem very unreasonable and quite monopolistic for them to be able to do that.
I think that's correct. And I know my previous authorities are in a similar space with the increase in licensing costs, specifically going to 365 and the requirements of how the funding structure works for it. We do get our licenses through Crown Commercial, which is a government procurement agency. And I know they've done a lot of work nationally with Microsoft in order to try and reduce the burden on local authorities. So my understanding is that the prices that we get in the public sector are beneficial to the ones in the private sector. I wouldn't be able to tell you how much at this moment in time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands up. Thank you for all the work that's gone into this. And absolutely, I was going to mention, trade waste is undoubtedly a success story, both in financial terms and actually as a quality standard. So I'm very much aware that some of our commercial rivals don't provide such a good service. So this is a report to review the review the financial monitoring details, including budget variances and performance indicators for the second quarter ending on the 30th of September, and that the committee approve the write-offs of council tax, business rates and housing benefits for the quarter. All those in agreement? Thank you. That's unanimous. I'm going to take agenda item 9 next, if that's all right with colleagues, because that enables Kathy to talk to it and then to escape through the snowy wastes and get home safely. So would you like to, is people okay with that? It's on page 157 of the pack. Over to you, Kathy.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is now our established approach regarding the early stages of budget setting, and committee are receiving a report that follows a similar structure and methodology that we've had for a few years and hopefully will be familiar to you. The rationale is not to have a debate at this stage, but simply to put the information in front of you so that you can see what changes you may want or may suggest, and then we'll come back in January and talk to the members about the budget again and get your view about what you would like to see. This is all bearing in mind that we do have a current revenue budget gap of £1 million for 25-26. Appendix 1 shows the transition of the budget from 22-23 through to 24-25, and the detailed budgets relevant to this committee, covering both income and expenditure. If members have any further questions on the detail of these, please contact me or Sal. The 24-25 Q2 year-end forecast for capital programme is shown as Appendix 2, and the capital programme that we approved in February 24 for 24-25 is shown in Appendix 3. That's the total programme, not just policy and resources area. And finally, we've got the relevant city plan project details for this committee in Appendix 4. For info, for now, this is more about providing information to you, and we'll come back in January, as I said, with more detail. In the meantime, any questions, please let me or Sal know, and we'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I very much understand that this is a paper really about timing and not necessarily for debate. So this is a question about timing. So I think elsewhere in the report pack, there's some description of the work that's ongoing at the moment with officers looking at cost savings and budget setting and trying to look at measures to improve our budget gap. But I think somewhere, I think it said that they were going to be reporting back in about February or March of next year. So my question really is, when we're sort of coming to set the budget, that's going to be early part of the year. We won't necessarily have the information that's coming out of that work. So this is a question about timing. Should we have that sight of that a bit earlier, so that even if it's in budget form, so that we can know what we're signing up to in terms of the budget?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. You've summed up leadership team's discussion this afternoon quite nicely, and I've written down some dates. In terms of it's going to be quite focused and a bit frenetic after Christmas in terms of where we stand now and where we need to be for the new financial year. We're expecting to get our settlement, normally it's around Christmas Eve time, so we get a nice Christmas present. It might be a bit early than that, we don't know, but I think the settlement and the fact that we will have more surety over the outturn for this financial year by then, because we'll be nearing the end of Q3, means that we can be in a much better position in terms of taking a number of informed recommendations to members between January and February, beginning of January, late February next year. So we've got group leaders meeting on the 6th of January, and we intend to come to that meeting with some outline direction of travel, if I can put it that way, in terms of some of the saving opportunities. We've got a P&R committee on the 4th of February, which is the budget committee. So the publication date for that will be the 27th of January. What we spoke about this afternoon, and this is therefore hot off the press, we haven't agreed this with anybody yet, as this is just conveying a discussion amongst officers this afternoon. We're looking at suggesting an additional P&R committee on the 22nd of January, which will give a publication date on the 14th of January. When I say 22nd, you know, obviously depends on member availability around that time, because we want to try to bring something to members through the committee process, rather than waiting for the absolute budget committee meeting on the 4th of February. If we wait until that meeting on the 4th of February and we can't, for whatever reason, agree a balanced budget, we will then have to call an emergency meeting in order to agree a budget, because the budget has to be agreed for recommendation to full council. So we are, as I say, the discussion we had this afternoon was thinking about getting an extra meeting in around the 22nd of January. So we've got effectively 3 bites of the cherry. We've got group leaders on the 6th, P&R special committee, call it that, on the 22nd, and then P&R budget committee on the 4th of February. And then that will allow that to be teed up for full council meeting. We've also got a group leaders briefing on the 2nd of December, so before Christmas, where we can start to have that discussion as well. So that really mirrors the discussion, well, that plays out the discussion we had just 2 or 3 hours ago, in terms of trying to build in more detail in that process. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, information hot off the press, and we await emails and the chance to peer into diaries and so on. But thank you. That's obviously plenty of opportunity for discussion among a number of levels. I've got Mel next.
Chair, thank you. Obviously, we've got the settlement fund up and coming, and I just want to sort of flag, obviously, remind everyone before that the prior Conservative government did promise this council 5 million in levelling up funding, and we did the sensible thing. We budgeted for it. We had some great plans in place. Obviously, now at the moment it looks as though we will not get that. So this is just a direct plea to National Labour, National Government, to Tom Collins MP, Rachel Reeves MP and Angela Rayner MP. Please do consider Worcester in the whole scheme of the country and all the billions being budgeted. 5 million is not much, but it will make a significant difference to this council. Thank you.
That wasn't really a question, was it? I mean, that there is an update in that we have received a form for completion with sort of technical details about contracts, the level of commitment for their project. So that form is to be completed and returned. And certainly, you know, lobbying is already taking place. Our MP, Tom Collins, has met ministers and is continuing to lobby, and officers have had some dialogue as to the way forward. So be assured we're doing all that we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, can you categorically confirm that we haven't already set a budget for the next year? I believe there was a comment made in the local pre-bill that Worcester City Council had decided their budget beforehand. And this was to do around the There's a storing around the levelling up money in terms of that, and I think a member made a comment that our budget had already been decided.
No budget has been set for 25-26 as yet, councillor.
So with regard to that 5 million levelling up money, it is not set into existing funding plans or budget plans, because it was an allocation from the previous government who put absolutely no money behind it. So we put in our request until the general election took place. There had been no response of any kind until the autumn budget. Is that okay? Correct? Yep. David, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I would just add that we would not seek to allocate any funding or seek to apportion funding to overhead recovery on any allocation until such time as we got a signed memorandum of understanding with the department. So no such activity has taken place.
Okay. Not seeing any further questions. So this is recommendation. The committee note the budgets for the various services identified for the current financial year and note the progress made in delivering projects included in the city plan that are relevant to this committee and confirms the programme of work resourced. Okay. Everybody in agreement with that? Thank you. So now we go to item 7, which is Q2 performance report. Sal, is that you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is the usual reporting of performance and activities associated with this committee as at Q2. Summarising the performance scorecard for the city plan projects and actions, we've got 3 green, 2 amber and 1 red. The red identified was to develop a MTFP savings plan in October 24, and whilst this has started, it's not complete, and the proposed date for change is taking it back to March 25, although we intend to have the savings plan done before that. For the key performance indicators, we have 6 green, 3 amber and 5 reds. And for the off-log metrics, we have 4 green, 2 amber, 2 red and a number not yet due. The detail of those performance indicators and performance are detailed within the appendix to the report. And on that note, Chair, hand over to you for questions.
Thank you very much. Who wants to ask about our performance figures? Louis?
Okay, my question is about customer feedback satisfaction. When you look at the graph over the last couple of years, it looks like there's a downward trend.
So just say which graph?
Yeah, so it's on page 108, and it's customer feedback satisfaction. Now, in the verbal sort of commentary underneath, it says this is perhaps isolated to 1 or 2 customers who give them quite a poor score. But this does seem to be a bit of a trend over a couple of years. So I'm not sure whether that can be quite right or not. I'm just wondering if there's any sort of thoughts or comments about that. I can recognise that there's only small sample sizes and it is a small interaction with people giving us feedback, but it is a sample, and it isn't just 1 or 2 months, 1 or 2 quarters. It seems to be a bit of a trend. So maybe we don't need to do anything now, but I think we ought to be just aware of it. Just a point, really. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I think you've already hinted on one of the issues with this measure, and that is the sample size. The number of interactions we have a day a week, a year is tens of hundreds of thousands. Therefore, the feedback from 24 is the confidence level or confidence interval on this, I dread to think what it would be statistically, not very good. But we can look at it and provide some more information. But yeah, it's a difficult one I would never dismiss any feedback as not important, but I think it's challenging in terms of its confidence level. Thank you.
I guess one message is to encourage more people to fill in the form and to give feedback. 24 people is not a representative section of our population. But thank you. Any other questions, observations? Karen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've just got a question about the mandatory training for officers. And this is because when you see the list, it's got some really, really crucial things such as manual handling and personal safety and fire safety within the list. And I suppose I'm a bit concerned the current target's 90% rather than 100%, because really if someone's doing a job that they haven't got the training for, then they're more likely to have an accident, which we don't want. And I wonder whether, you know, in some jobs it may not be as important to do the display screen equipment, for example. You know, could we maybe just adjust this to actually show that the people who are doing manual jobs have all done the proper training that they should do for the job? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Mandatory training for officers is set at 90% to reflect the sort of turnover of staff and the onboarding process in terms of the amount of mandatory modules. It's absolutely true that as an individual, you should be complying with 100% of your mandatory training. It's also true that through the lens of health and safety, I've been keen that we really unpack this word mandatory and make sure people are getting the training that they need for their job. And so there are a set of mandatory modules that relate to office staff. They're all important, GDPR, DSE. There's a set of other modules that relate to operational staff. There's overlap between the two. I have asked for a bit more information to come forward to the leadership team about the Council's corporate training plan to make sure that as a tool for risk management, we're satisfied that that mandatory mapping is up to date across people's jobs. And a number of colleagues do very multifaceted jobs and they need that kind of matrix approach to what even their mandatory training is. I'm pleased to say that in the last 6 months, colleagues have been meeting with heads of service and going through role profiles and looking again at the mandatory training list. And I'm also pleased to say that since we've had the current health and safety officer in post at the council, two years now, she's taken the council to pretty much 100% compliance on something like DSE. So I think it's a sustained effort, but I personally have asked that we receive a bit more visibility of that at CLT because it's a dynamic picture and needs to be kept up to date.
Just, I mean, it is a significant uptrend, isn't it? Now, well, there's a huge amount of effort goes into achieving 90% mandatory. So I'll kind of put on record, well done to managers and well done to staff for achieving that. It's a real big effort. I've got Hannah.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to comment on the percentage of household waste recycled and the recycling contamination rate. I've raised it at Environment Committee before, but I just think it's really poor. I've also raised with officers that I've noticed that waste operatives are taking things that are left out on the street on recycling day that cannot be recycled. And I've spoken to them directly in the past and they've said they don't feel empowered enough to be putting stickers on bins because they're having to go back to those houses week in, week out, and they feel worried about it. So it's just a plea to find ways to make them feel more empowered so that we can really get this contamination rate lower. Thank you.
I think, Lloyd, you're the man that might have the answers.
Thanks, Chair. As Environment Committee members will know, we're doing some targeted proactive work over the Christmas and into the new year around increasing recycling and lowering contamination rates. So Councillors' feedback will be taken on board and we'll report back to committee on how that work is going in due course as well.
Thank you. I'd just like to say a quick word in my guise as Armed Forces champion. I recently was in touch with our housing service and with Sian as well about the fact that an e-learning module on housing and veterans has become available. We've recently received details of how to access that. So I'd like to feel that as a council, we were living up to our obligations under the Armed Forces Act by making this a regular part of training. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just picking a point Councillor Cooper makes. It's a really valid question, I think, in terms of that. I mean, I know you and I have got a meeting with the frontline staff lined up to, meet with them direct to see the day-to-day issues in terms of that, just to understand from their perspective what are the everyday issues, what are the challenges in terms of the messaging that they get on the doorstep. And of course, like any public officer, they're open to abuse as well, aren't they, in terms of that, and whether they feel intimidated in some parts to be able to do that. So it's a mapping exercise for us, which Lynn and I are really going to be taking on board, whether it's our frontline operatives or those that sat behind the desk. So thank you for raising that.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to comment on the major planning applications. I think it was last week there was an event here with planning agents and the planning team. And just for members that weren't in that meeting, the feedback from planning agents was just so positive about the planning department. Councillor Agar and Councillor Lewin were there. And it just made us, I'm sure, feel very proud of the service. Just a real buzz about the room, and I'd just really like to congratulate officers on how well they're doing and our reputation, and they're really striving for excellence. So it's wonderful to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We did receive a lot of compliments. One or two suggestions for future improvements, but they were on a friendly level. And we're taking those forward.
Thank you. I've got a question around the one of the projects, which is the sort of energy saving, the solar panels on for Freedom Leisure at Purdy's Well. Have we kind of been able to get a contractor now? Are there issues there that we need to be worrying about?
Chair, apologies, I don't have that detail on me this evening. Sal May. Yep. Bear with me a second. Sorry, Chair. My understanding is we're looking to make the award, and I've been asked to sign off the award confirmation because it exceeds Kevin's limit. So yes, the answer is yes.
That's good to hear and reassuring. So, given that there will be, a demand from a number of areas for solar panels, I'm pleased to hear that we've hopefully got a signed up contractor and able to go ahead with that. Jabba?
Sure. Just for transparency purposes, and Chair, it was a competitive bidding process. Do we know how many bidders there were in that process?
Not at the top of my head, Councillor, no, but we can find out. Yes, it went through a tender process, is my understanding, through a national framework.
Okay, any other questions, comments around performance for the council. So recommend that the P&R committee note Q2 performance and approve the revision of project due date, and that's with regard to the financial savings plan, which we've obviously just discussed. Everybody happy to accept those recommendations? Thank you. Right, we're motoring on. What have we got now? Agenda item 8, corporate risk management report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an assessment of the corporate risks as at the end of Q2, accompanied with the revised corporate risk register. So going straight to the conclusions then, at the end of Q2 there were 13 corporate risks. 3 of these remain as red and continue to require treatment. 7 are classed as amber and are acceptable, and 3 are green and are classed as tolerable. There is a detailed description of the corporate risks and the mitigating actions including their status with the latest updates, and these are outlined in Appendix 2, and this also includes a high-level summary of the service risks. It's fair to say that most risks have remained consistent when compared to the previous report, with the exceptions of health and safety and lone working, and the direction of travel is presented on page 137 of the combined report. On that note, Chair, pass back for any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sal, for the report. Just a couple of questions I have at the moment. So risks CRK 11 and CRK 12, which is ICT security and ICT systems infrastructure. Both of these things excite me during my day job. And I can see that we're recommending, or you're recommending, that CRK 12 is removed from the corporate risk register. Are we thinking about merging that with CRK 11, which is the ICT security, or just forgetting about ICT infrastructure in totality? I'm not confident that we should do that.
So the risks associated with the ICT systems infrastructure are deemed to be included within the cybersecurity elements. So they will still remain as service risks and picked up within David Sutton's area. So we will still be looking at the risk around our infrastructure, making sure it's fit for purpose, it falls in line with our strategies and our architecture, etc. So I think that it's deemed to be a low risk element for moving that out of the corporate risk register. And sorry, I can't remember what the question was on ICT security.
Well, were we thinking of moving ICT systems infrastructure in with ICT security as a combined risk rather than 2 separate risks?
It would be wrapped up, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll start again. On the service risk summary overview, we have a number of service risk registers. Do councillors get an opportunity to review those, scrutinise those? Should they get an opportunity to review those, scrutinise those?
Through you, Chair. So the answer is yes and no, Councillor. Obviously it's a function of the Audit and Governance Committee to receive regular reports and challenge the work of the internal audit function. And the internal audit work programme is very much informed by risk registers at all levels at the organisation, including service risk registers. So that's my indirectly yes currently. No, specifically, we don't present all of the service risk registers to any particular committee. Fans of the ongoing governance review will recall that in the terms of reference, we had a line around risk and posed the question about the level of oversight around risk registers. It is something we could look to broaden out, but cognizant of the kind of roles and responsibilities that sit with the statutory officer team, to date, the officer recommendation has been and remains that service risk registers should be managed and overseen by the corporate leadership team and the corporate management team. But because we're doing the governance review, we can no doubt look at that again if people want to.
Thank you, Sharon. And then my final point is on CRK 41, which is the increased demand for assistance and support. We are seeing increasing levels of ASB from young people across the city. And it's been particularly concerning that WCT have closed, have excluded young people from each of the community centres, and I'm grateful to officers for intervening on that. I am increasingly concerned by the levels of ASB. It's a bad thing, without wanting to understate it. But we don't see that as a risk, as a called out risk here. And I think we should be increasingly worried about the levels of antisocial behaviour we're seeing.
Chair, thank you to Councillor Norfolk for his comments. Obviously, we've got a team within the council that's dedicated to youth outreach, including some community safety work, but nothing has been fed back to us by that area of the business to say that demand or volume is increasing to a point where we cannot respond to that. However, that said, what we can do is go away and talk to key partners around that area of the world to understand that better, and we can bring that back and consider whether or not it is something that needs to be identified either as a service risk register or whether it needs to be lifted up to a corporate risk register.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just following up on Councillor Norfolk's point is increasingly over the last year we've been putting our focus and attention on children and young people in terms of that and putting that within our policy documentation and in terms of that, and it is harrowing to hear what's been happening of late in terms of that, and it's whether I'm asking obviously whether we can put children and young people and the service we give them as a specific risk register item within this.
Chair, again, we'll take that feedback, and that's a conversation that we can have offline. I think first of all as a CLT and consider if and where that fits within the overall risk setting of the council.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. In support of the council's idea of speaking out, and I'm sure it was an accident, but I just wanted to identify that Lloyd used the wrong pronoun for Councillor Norfolk just then.
Apologies, Chair, and apologies to the committee if I did. Yeah, sorry.
Whilst I'm grateful for colleagues' concerns about the use of pronouns with me, I'd rather deal with these matters myself when I hear them, but thank you anyway.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to see a reference to wet weather in the risk reports, especially with heritage buildings. We're seeing quite a lot of walls fall down at the moment. I've had one last week in the Arboretum, had one about a month ago as well, residence walls in fact. It's the age of walls in the city particularly that we're concerned about. But obviously there are other aspects of climate change to our heritage and historic built environments, which include decay, flood damage, structural movement and biological growth and all sorts of other aspects. I know that the church particularly are doing lots of work on their buildings. There's like a whole group for looking at the impact of climate change on our historic things. I have talked to Paul Collins about it. He's very aware of it, and I wonder whether we need to expand that a little bit to take in more than just the wet weather. It's the other risks to do with temperature change and other weather things that are happening, you know, stronger winds and all sorts of stuff. So whether we could just look at expanding that a little bit more. Thank you.
Sorry, which risk is it? Which page are you on?
It's within, let me see, it's mentioned in asset maintenance. It says after a prolonged period of wet weather, there's an increased risk to the stability of assets owned by the council. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. It's near the bottom. It's page 150. Thank you.
It's through you, Chair. We can look at increasing the mitigating actions and take that up with Kevin later.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask a question. I'm afraid I already know the answer to the question, but it will be useful for other councillors to be aware, and it's around asset maintenance. My understanding of it is that when we talk about assets, we're talking about buildings and things that we own rather than green spaces or forests that come under the remit of the council. And I wonder whether there might be some room for thinking about irregular maintenance of these green spaces. At the moment, we seem to have more of a firefighting response if something goes wrong and we need to find the money for it. What scope do you think in the future, not in the immediate, in the immediate future, for thinking about it differently of how we maintain our green spaces?
Through you, Chair, I'll offer some view on this as Sal has only recently joined us, and this goes back to Shane's time here. We've as leadership team, we've spoke often about preventive maintenance, for want of a better word, whether that's green space or physical buildings, and in some cases, such as the properties that we've acquired at Charles Hastings Way, we have set up a sinking fund, for want of a better description, whereby a top slice of the revenue income has been set aside for buildings, repair and maintenance. But generally, we have taken a decision not to do that across the piece. And it's not an I think it's important to say it's not an oversight on our part. It's a purposeful decision on officers' parts not to do it, because if we were to set up sinking funds, for want of a better description, on all of our assets, we would literally have all of our money tied up in pots waiting to be used for as and when an eventuality occurred, and that would leave us with very little money, I would suggest, to do anything else with. So the decision has always been, broadly, not in every instant, as I mentioned Charles Hastings Way, but the decision has broadly been that we won't set aside a growing pot of funds, but we would address matters as and when they arose, as a purposeful approach. In some cases, it's been better for us to either borrow internally from funds that we've set aside, or even borrow externally to address building repairs and maintenance, for want of a better phrase, than set that money aside. That's the approach we've always taken, and that was approach we regarded as the best use of our funds. Of course, if members feel that we should be more prudent and take a different policy approach, then that obviously is something we can consider. But up until now, we've taken a purposeful approach not to tie up too much money in allocations where it means it's then off limits from members to do some of the things that you want to do. I hope that's sort of a reasonable explanation of our approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Yeah, that is a very sensible decision. So it's not meant as a criticism. It's just raised as a question, particularly specifically for green spaces, because I'm aware of different areas where we've had to find money for specific projects, and it's always challenging to figure out what's the best route in addressing those concerns in those green spaces. But I appreciate the response, and yes, I do agree that the approach is sensible. It's just wanted to flag it up to members.
Thank you. I've got a question around the safeguarding risk on page 149. It says that the annual safeguarding report is scheduled for summer 2025, which begs the question that we appear not to have had an annual safeguarding report in 2024. And as I believe that, I formally am safeguarding lead for the council, I'm a bit worried that we haven't had anything since July 2023.
Through you, Chair, forgive me, I believe it's due to come to this committee in December. Now that Personnel and General Purposes is not meeting regularly, it is scheduled, that update doesn't pick that up, but it is scheduled to come to this meeting in December.
Thank you very much. That's reassuring. So that's a correction or a mitigation that needs to be made to that risk then. So P&R December 24. Thank you. On that basis, is committee happy to note the updated assessment of corporate risks at the end of Q2 and the revised corporate risk register? Okay. Thank you. Nobody against that. Lovely. Agenda item 10 is referral from Place and Economic Development Committee and is about the Gelluvelt Park splash pad and Worcester Play Plan update.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I won't take too long, given it's a referral report. Members will be aware that PED Committee have approved a plan of action for repairing the splash pad in time for the operating season to start next year. The cost estimates we've had for that work are coming in at around £350,000. And again, PED Committee approved bringing a proposal to this committee around use of £294,000 of community infrastructure levy, supported by around £73,000 of Section 106 approval. That comes out at around £366,000. That gives us a little bit of flexibility as well, given the way projects run. A question's been asked outside of committee as to the impact of using that remaining amount of SIL that's already been approved by PED Committee for Play on the existing play plan. Just in response to that, the £400,000 that was approved, that would have never achieved all we want to achieve through the Worcester Play plan. So there would have always been a need to have looked elsewhere for funding. Shah may want to comment, there will be more opportunities around community infrastructure levy. That won't be the only slug of money we will get from SIL. As again, we've reported to the PED Committee in the last several months, there's a significant list of Section 106 funding directly relating to play and recreation that can be used for the play plan. As members will be aware, officers can bring business case for capital borrowing for play opportunities. And there's also an increasing number of external grant opportunities for play as well. So in proposing use of that remaining SIL allocation for this project, we don't believe it will impact our progress in respect of the play plan. Chair, can I just finish off by apologising for just one change that we need to make verbally in respect to the recommendations. The recommendations really should focus on this committee approving officers to commence a procurement exercise to undertake those works up to a value of £366,000. So that's made up of the SIL and the Section 106 money. And then subject to that approval, for this committee to recommend to Council an adjustment to the capital programme for that same value. So I'm happy to stop there, Chair, and take any questions.
So sorry, just that verbal update, is that within the report, the recommendations, or a rewording of the recommendations that went to PED, Place and Economic Development Committee, yeah?
Yes, that's right, Chair. Yeah.
So it's those bits that need to be referred into P&R because of the scale of the finances.
Yeah, so it's the scale of the finance and the approval to go out to tender as well.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Robin?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lloyd. It was my pleasure to chair a very convivial meeting, PED meeting, earlier this month, and particularly around the splash pad. I think I can confidently say that there was unanimous support from within PED to support the spend and the maintenance of and the changes to the splash pad. It must also be noted that councillors expressed one concern about the effectiveness and the requirement for the proposed barriers around the splash pad, and officers did commit to reviewing the necessity for those, although I do understand the reason behind installing them. And the second was that following a year's worth of implementation following the refurbishment of the splash pad, that we would review extending, or the possibility of extending, the opening hours for the splash pad, particularly in extreme weather conditions where it was just very, very warm, and also looking at perhaps closing it down when nobody's going to use it, i.e. when it's very, very wet. But on behalf of PED, I really would like to recommend the spend on the splash pad at Gillyville Park.
Thank you. Any other comments? Jessie?
Just a comment. I wanted to say thank you very much for all the work that has gone through this. It's a really important project, not just for Claines, but also for all young people across the city. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the splash pad is absolutely part of Worcester's play plan, and many children, generations of children and families have had fun with the splash pad. So very much in support of the recommendation. And I think it's perhaps also worth noting this is kind of one of the benefits of development, our ability to invest in infrastructure by using the community infrastructure levy and section 106 grants. You sometimes think we only get the downside of development and forget the investment in. Okay, now I've got hands up. Hannah?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to echo everything Councillor Norfolk said. I agree, it's completely unanimous. There was no debate about this. We all recognise the importance of the splash pad, and the benefit of doing it now would mean that it could be open in time for the next summer season. So I would like to support this and encourage you to support it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Yeah, I mean, you know, the splash pad's very close to St Stephen as well, and I know our residents are very keen to make full use of it. I do think the splash pad, if we're talking about sink funds, that's not a mixed metaphor, is a good example of where we should consider having a sink fund for the future, because we know that our splash pad was designed for 7 to 10 years and has lasted 14. But as it's a premier piece of play equipment in the city, and we know that anything involving water systems does naturally degrade over time and require further maintenance, that's something we should consider making sure we have a budget for in future to keep it for many generations in the future as well.
Okay, I think the principles around that are probably similar to what David described with regard to green spaces, isn't it? Putting money aside that is not available for now and for the things that we need to do now. And we have found the money for this investment and upgrading of the splash pad. So all those in favour of the recommendations about releasing the funding and authorising officers to tender for that work. Thank you. Is that unanimous? Thank you very much. Sorry. Next, agenda item 11 is another referral from committee, and this time it's from Environment Committee, and it's about the annual goal review and the programme for next year.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just run through it very briefly again. So, Environment Committee approved a GUL programme for next year. And as members will be aware, there's a core budget in respect of GULs. That stands at around £30,000. And that covers three elements. That covers core work around subsidised GUL proofing, subsidised egg and nest removal, and then the officer costs that are supplied by WRS as well. What Environment Committee also wanted to send on to P&R Committee for approval was an additional spend of £10,500 that would cover subsidised GUL proofing work in a different area of the city, some additional egg and nest removal work, and some anti-pecking measures within the high street as well, and that combined comes to £10,500. I think officers' recommendation, Chair, is that money is taken from reserves rather than adding it as a budget pressure to the MTFP. It's only a small amount, but it's prudent to try and look elsewhere to try and fund that. Within the Environment Committee's reserves, there are three areas that we feel the money can be taken from. There's an Environmental Sustainability Reserve with over £150,000 in it at the moment. There's the Ash Dieback Reserve with £50,000 plus in it. And there's also £10,000 that was set aside for upskilling our operation team around biodiversity. So I think, Chair, our recommendation would be with over £200,000 within those three reserves in particular, taking £10,500 for this additional GUL work is probably the best way to be able to deal with it. I'll stop there, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that sort of explanation of the finances. Karen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As Vice Chair of Environment Committee, I worked with Zoe on this piece of work a lot. We met with the GUL officer and WRS to talk about the pressures on their work and how they actually maximise what they do for quite a small budget, and how with a little bit more money they could make a big difference. And that's where the idea for these projects came from, and particularly the idea of getting rid of the roosting positions on the high street. We have seen swooping on residents when they're eating, and actually it's learned behaviour. So if we can prevent it growing, actually that's a really good piece of work. And it's also looking at an area of the city where we've got a vacant building, but it's near some really sensitive buildings as well. It's a doctor's surgery in a school. And so that's also quite a vulnerable area of the city with a huge, about 80 nests, I think, across the two roofs. So we did some really careful look at the projects. There was actually a lot more work that we could have recommended, but we think we've been quite prudent in what we're asking for. So I do hope that you'll support it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, kind of hesitate to go into the detail when obviously Environment Committee have looked excuse me, at that detail, and I think the key thing is actually to understand, well, to be mindful that this is a discretionary activity, and you know, when the council is under financial strain, it is worth noting that we have no legal obligation to undertake this work. But we are getting contributions from some households and some landlords to work together on it. So I think with the explanation of the use of existing reserves from that are earmarked for Environment Committee, is this committee happy to approve an additional fund of £10,500 for the GULs for next year? Okay, all those in favour? Yep. Anybody against? No. Thank you. Next committee referral, agenda item 12, and that relates to Freedom Leisure proposed fees and charges for the next calendar year.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll go through it as quickly as I possibly can. So some members will be aware that Freedom Leisure bring their fee and charge proposal to members in late autumn, early winter, and that's to get ahead of the New Year period where uptake in membership is particularly important to leisure organisations. So Communities Committee scrutinised the fee and charge proposal from Freedom Leisure a couple of weeks ago. I went through that with a fine tooth comb. Just in terms of the headlines, the average increase across all types of activity offered by Freedom Leisure, the proposal is to increase that on average by 4.4%. Now, last year, Freedom's costs increased by 9%, whilst their income only increased by 4%. So they've tried to set it at a reasonable level, taking that into account. And in the main, those costs are driven by the continued increase in energy costs, and a rise in salary costs as well, linked to minimum wage and national living wage. Officers are happy to recommend this, as were Communities Committee, and there are three important reasons for that, Chair. Number one, allowing Freedom to increase income in this way will hopefully allow them to invest more into our sites as part of the contract. Obviously, the council benefits from a management fee from Freedom Leisure. So again, an increase in fees and charges for them will give the best chance of us receiving that management fee. And lastly, as members will be aware, over the last few years, the council have supported Freedom Leisure with the increase in energy costs, and again, allowing them to increase their fees and charges will reduce that reliance upon the council. So there is a positive benefit to the council, and Communities Committee agreed that the rise in fees and charges was reasonable.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments, Jabba?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. To reiterate, it was a really useful discussion at Communities Committee when Freedom Leisure presented to us in terms of their offering, and it was recognised that the service that they do provide is regionally one of the best in terms of what we're getting, and their new outreach programme that they've got out into the community, run by Amanda, I think it is. Adele, sorry, even, was exactly what we kind of envisaged, I suppose, our community centre offering and what Freedom Leisure outreach was supposed to be like. In terms of that, they get people, they understand, and obviously reflected in terms of the fees and charges that they were raising. That in terms of that, there was a few areas of concerns which were highlighted, but they were explained by Alan New in terms of where they were. But I'm quite happy to support this recommendation and recognise Freedom are doing a relatively good job within the city.
Thank you. Alex?
Thank you, Chair. So I supported the report when it came through communities, and I'm happy to support it again now, but I did just want to highlight one particular area that I think is concerning. So the people from Freedom Leisure confirmed in that meeting that they have increased swim school class sizes in line, they said, with Swim England recommendations. So for younger children, they've increased them from 8 to 10 children, and for older children from 10 to 12 children. So that's a 20 to 25% increase in class sizes, and I would imagine they are going to see a 20 to 25% increase in revenue being brought in, because I don't see the fees have not decreased. And indeed, the schools swim school memberships are seeing the highest rise this year as well, 10% on top of that increase in school class sizes. So, like I said, I'm happy to support it again, but I'm not sure that the balance is being struck correctly in where they're raising the revenue in this area. So I would certainly be keeping a close eye on it in future years, so that we're not seeing further increases of a similar size.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And you made the same points that you made in the Communities Committee around that. I think there was a healthy discussion around the offering of swim school, and in terms of the other offering that they obviously that the additional benefits of swim school that swim school students get on top of that, in terms of the free swimming in terms of that. So that was kind of recognised. The other concern that we did raise was around obviously accessibility to swimming, and how to identify other opportunities to help people that can't swim from areas of highest needs, or those that can't swim a minimum of 25 metres when they reach age 6, how they identifying those, and whether that service level agreement that we'd originally put in place all that time ago, who's holding them to account. So trying to increase the opportunity for people from that aren't learning to swim, that are not being caught by the net, in order to kind of address that. So we'll be pushing hard on that as well.
Thank you. Hannah?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to raise the same point that I raised last year at communities when I was on communities. It's about school swimming, which, to be very clear, is different from swim school. This is about primary schools going to Perd as well for swimming lessons. I don't have any issue with the increase, but I do have issue over the timing. So schools set their budget April to April, and it's very hard for them to plan these changes if they don't know they're going to be happening. So I'm wondering if there's something that can be done or in the future to make sure that school swimming budget is set at a time that schools know about in advance to be able to plan their budgets correctly. Thank you.
Chair, I'm not sure whether that is possible through the process, but what I will certainly do is ask Alan New to pick up Councillor Cooper's comments and pick those up directly with Freedom ahead of next year.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we can pick that up. But the other point around that was made around school swimming by Councillor Ali, if I remember, was actually the pupils that are benefiting from that school swimming. Are they getting the appropriate attention and training necessary for them to learn to swim, or are they just having a good time? You understand? They're going there. Some pupils learn to swim. Some people just paddle around in a pool. Is there enough attention and swim teachers available for all those kids that are using those swim schools? For school swimmers, the opportunity. So that was a question raised around that, which I've raised with Freedom as well.
Thank you, Chair. In raising Councillor Riaz's point, in lots of cases it's the school's own teachers that are doing those swimming lessons. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Remember the point that I wanted to make. I mean, I think we are lucky, that Freedom Leisure is a not-for-profit organisation. So these increases are not about increasing their profit. It is about enabling them to undertake community activities and to kind of maximise their health and wellbeing impact for our communities. And I was really pleased to see, because that within the offer, because I'm actually on the corporate parenting board for the county council as a county councillor, and actually the corporate parenting meeting is tomorrow, and Freedom Leisure do have appropriate allowances for carers, foster carers and children, and looked after children. So really pleased to see that's in, then I'll be able to report that back at tomorrow's meeting. So is committee happy to note the recommendation from Communities Committee in respect of the proposed fees and charges for the 2025 calendar year submitted by Freedom Leisure as set out in Appendix 1, and to recommend these charges to Council in December 2024 for full and final approval? And I hope we don't need to repeat the same things that have been said at Communities Committee and have been said tonight. They don't need to be said again at full council, I would suggest. But we're happy to make the recommendations to go to council. All those in favour? Thank you. We're on the home straight now. Item 13, use of Managing Director's urgency powers, renewal of the business rates pool.
Thank you, Chair. So I understand that this report has become something of an annual event. at this committee, and it's due to the timing of when the council has to inform government that it intends to be part of a business rates pool, and the timing of this committee meeting, which are never in sync. So this is basically a report that's presented every year to you now, and it's stating that the council wishes to continue with the business rates pool, which is a benefit to the council in terms of revenue. Shane had already informed MHCLG in October that we were continuing with the pool, and this is now the standard report which notes the use of the urgency powers to agree to participate in the Worcestershire Business Rates Pool for 2025-26. We're still anticipating government at some stage going to grips with the business rates position and resetting, etc. So that's the report in essence, Councillor Chair.
Any questions or comments? Is committee happy to note the use of urgency powers to agree to participate in the Worcestershire Business Rates Pool for the next financial year, and to delegate to the interim corporate director to Finance and Resources authority to finalise the arrangements for the pool in consultation with the chair and vice chairs of this committee? All those in agreement? Thank you very much. Last item, unless someone's got some sneaky any other business that I don't know about. Appointments to outside bodies. Sian?
Thank you, Chair. Members who are familiar with the appointments to outside bodies process will be reassured that this is a single item tonight, as opposed to a multitude of appointments that we take round the table. This has fallen out as a result of our previous appointment decisions, and it was recognised that the appointment to Citizens Advice Worcester and Herefordshire needed to be separate from officers serving that organisation and similar related organisations. Councillor Round has a working relationship with Dial South Worcestershire, which was considered by Councillor Round and Citizens Advice themselves to be a little bit too close to the need for a trustee appointment to Citizens Advice. So with Councillor Round's consent, it's been proposed that a separate nomination is made to Citizens Advice Worcester and Herefordshire. There's been a nomination, that's Councillor Adam Scott. So, Chair, I'll refer to you to seek any other nominations or take that to the vote.
Do we have any other nominations to be a representative on Citizens Advice Bureau Worcester? Okay, I presume on that basis that members of the committee are happy to agree to Councillor Scott being our representative. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's what happens when you don't step back quickly enough. Thank you very much, and safe journey home, everybody.